that this is an event fully organized by the Woodland Hills Neighborhood Collective. We paid to rent the space, and the church does not endorse this event. Thank you so much again for being here. We are a 100% volunteer organization. If you came to the St. Mel's event in December, we just had met each other 2 or 3 weeks before. Now we are a 501c4 organization. We've organized, we've coordinated, and I've had the pleasure to work with my board members, Jackie Sly, Alex Raymond, and Elise Tyler, president of Woodland Hills Neighborhood Collective, who's out sick today, unfortunately. So thank you to these individuals. It's been a great pleasure. Volunteers that have helped us, including the people who have flyered to get you all here today. I'm going to do a big shout out to Heather and Brian, winners for West Side Flyering, and Bruce, winner for East Side Flyering. Bruce, you beast. Okay, real quick, if you are not on the Woodland Hills Neighborhood Collective mailing list, please find one of us and sign up so you may stay informed. And I'm going to hand it over to my moderators now. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. If you remember from when we met at the church event, I was the engineer. I talked about what makes a neighborhood right for development and what does not. And one of the first things I'd like to say is that we are not anti-development. What we are is anti-irresponsible development. And that's why we're here. The golf course is private property, and I'm not going to steal Bob's thunder and talk about a lot of things. I'll let him talk about it. He's the expert. And they're allowed to do with private property what they're allowed to do. This is the country we live in. Unfortunately, and Bob's going to talk about it, there have been some laws that have been passed in Sacramento that are allowing developers to do things that track like ours, like the Girard track, is not really designed for. And this is why we're here. We are here for responsible development. So with that, I'd like to say that also, you've been getting a lot of emails from us. Our website is here. Everything is on the web. Go ahead and look there. So we, again, are the Woodland Hills Neighborhood Collective. The Woodland Hills Landwise Alliance is also here, and I'm sure we share mailing lists, so you've been getting items from them as well. Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy has been a real friend and leader to all of us, so thank you very much for that.
Mountain Conservancy is here. So now that we've given his colleagues a round of applause, can we give Paul specifically?
Also somewhere hiding from the Alliance, Jamie Toscas is also here. There she is, in the front, if you want to ask her questions. Mountains Recreation Conservancy Authority, MERCA, they've also been a real help and continue to be a big help for us, so thank you for them.
And if these, I think this one's working too, right? Okay. If that's a lot of acronyms, some of you have been lucky enough to pick up a term sheet with acronyms and definitions. If you haven't been, look around and find someone who's studying a 4-page document. These organizations are listed on that document in addition to a lot of the terminology that we're going to be using today. You can ask your neighbor for help. Please keep the conversation going.
And you can always ask us. Allison is standing over there in the corner. She knows everything.
Let's check Bob's too.
Check, check, check.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Okay, Alex and I will share.
And then also Woodland Hills Homeowners Association, the WHO. Thank you to the WHO. The WHO has been fantastic in helping us and has been a great resource to us as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce Bob Blumenfield, who is our city councilman, and he will take it from here, and then we'll close out and we'll talk about some next steps.
Thank you. I'm happy to sort of walk through the process a little bit, and then we can open up to questions or however you want to move it. So my name's Bob Blumenfield. I know many of you here. I'm a council member. I represent Woodland Hills, as well as Tarzana, Reseda, Winnetka, and Canoga Park. I also am the chair of the city's Planning and Land Use Management Committee, or the Plum Committee. Now, ordinarily, a project like this would come to the city, and then it would go through an extensive process. The neighborhood council would weigh in on it. The planning commission would weigh in on it. Ultimately, it would come to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, which I chair, and we would discuss it and we would weigh in on it. And ultimately, usually in that process, there's a lot of give and take. And at the end of the day, something gets developed. It's private land, but it's, everybody's a little bit unhappy, and that's how it works out. But you go through what's called the CEQA process, which is the California Environmental Quality Act, and you get to assess some of the obvious environmental issues that are present here. I mean, we're talking about a high fire severity zone. We're talking about these tiny little streets. I mean, it just seems it's beyond belief to think that we could circumvent all that and not have those discussions. But unfortunately, the normal process that has been in play is not in play here. What happened I've handed out a number of handouts. Although my understanding is they're all gone. We had about 5 or 6 handouts. One of them was a timeline to talk about the process that is happening. But basically, I'll go back actually a couple years. A couple years ago, the developers came to me in my office, and they said, we're thinking of doing this development, and they didn't describe it exactly the way it is here. What do you think, or how do you do it? And I say what I say to all developers. I say, well, I'm happy to look at it, but you're going to have to go through a community process. You're going to have to meet with the neighborhood council. You're going to have to come before this committee. We're going to ask tough questions, and we're going to work through a process. But ultimately, I get it. It's private property. They have a right to develop. Like you said, I'm in the same boat. I am not anti-development. You look at what we've done in the Warner Center. We have grown faster than any other part of the city. But I'm for responsible development, and I'm for our open space. You mentioned the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, one of my favorite organizations. I worked there for 4 years. And with the MRCA. So this is a passion for me in terms of open space and preserving our critical lands. I don't think that's incompatible with development. But again, getting back to the timeline here, normally we go through this process, but on October 10th, just recently in 2025, the governor signed 40 different laws having to do with housing and land use, all in one day. It was a major package of bills that went through the last, through that year. He signed them all. It was heralded as a great move in, promoting housing. Well, and one of those was SB 79, which you probably heard about that one. But tucked in those 40 bills was 2 bills that have nothing to do with our area, that would be very hard to decipher, that would impact our area unless you really understood it. One of them had to do with the community college district. And so they were about completely different topics. One was by Senator Buffy Wicks, one was by Assemblymember Mike Fong. Well, both of those laws amended a bill called AB 2011, which had been passed a year earlier, which is not a bad bill. AB 2011 allows for expedited review along commercial corridors so that they can build housing quicker and without going through the regular review process, and we can go back and forth about whether that makes any sense. I think there is some merit to it, but it's limited to commercial corridors. It excluded high fire severity zones. Well, these new bills that were passed, 2 of them, basically made little tweaks to AB 2011. Those tweaks put this golf course right in the bullseye. And I had never heard of these bills. Most people, even I think the people who voted on it, probably had no idea that they would have an impact. I mean, there were so many bills going through, and in order to understand it, you really have to almost, we did the forensics afterwards to try to figure out what's going on. So these bills passed on October 10th, and then a couple of weeks later, the developer for this project applies to the city of Los Angeles to develop this project, and they cite these new bills and this new process, and they say, hey, we want to do this big project. It's 398 unit multifamily building, 223 apartments, 175 single family detached condominiums, approximately 19.9 acre site, and 97 affordable housing units for very low income households, which is one of the requirements to get this expedited process. And they proposed using the streamlining process known as mixed income housing developments along commercial corridors. And of course, you scratch your head because you're like, this is not a commercial corridor. And then you have to go back and they cite the two bills that make these tweaks. So then the city, and the community hears about this. Everybody gets up in arms. I think you planned a meeting like the next week or something. I go to that meeting as well, expecting 20 people, and there was like 1,000. And we go and we're figuring out that these bills and the way the developer is applying them, the developer is saying to the city, you don't have a choice. You have to approve this, what's called ministerially, meaning the state has said if it checks the boxes, you have to approve it. You don't get to apply CEQA, you don't get to apply discretion, you don't get to make changes. If it checks the boxes, you have to approve it. And if it applies with the law. So we go back and at that meeting, I was saying, look, I don't, this is new to me, this is new to all of us, these are new laws. We're gonna throw everything we can, I get it. To me, we're gonna throw everything at the wall, because just instinctively, I know this is not, the way they propose this doesn't make any sense. So at that point, we start trying to figure out what are the avenues to push this back, not even to stop the project, but just to put it back into a regular process, a discretionary process, whereby there are hearings and there's environmental laws that we have to go through. So November 21st, they signed the project, and then December 18th, just a few weeks later, the city issues a status of project review letter, putting the case on a processing hold. So I immediately go to the planning department also, and I say, hey, don't just do this, blindly. Look at every, I can't tell them what to do, but I say, cross every T, dot every I. This is really important to our community. Don't just, agree with what the developer said here. So, long story, there's a lot of back and forth. They deem that the project is not complete. And then everybody here thinks that's great, but except under the law, an incomplete project doesn't mean that the project is stopped, it just means the developer can go fix whatever they said is wrong. And that's part of the normal process when they go through this. So and the timing is really important because under the state law, there is like a shot clock. So the moment that the city gets this project, we have to approve it within, I think, 60 days. 60 days. However, if you can show that something is not complete, it goes back to the developer and the shot clock restarts. So that happened a couple of times over the last couple of months where we've thrown it back and said it's not complete, they make their changes, and then they kick it back. I went down a number of different rabbit holes trying to throw things against the wall. Some of the rabbit holes that you all suggested, one of which was, well, one of the things in this law is that the street has to be 60 feet wide, and the street is 60 feet. So someone said, hey, what about narrowing the street and making it not apply that way? So I said, hey, that's really smart. And I put in a motion into the city to say, hey, what would it take to narrow the street? And we try to do that, but that's going to be a year-long process or more, and it's not going to solve the problem for this.
Bob, is that called a road diet? Am I right in remembering that?
It's actually not a road diet. I guess you could call it a road diet. Usually they use road diet to refer to something else, but it's just basically a narrowing of the road. which could potentially happen, but there would be issues with the fire department and all sorts of other things, and it would take way too long. So then we went down another rabbit hole, I call it, where one of the things in the state bill that says it does not apply if it's on vacant land. And so, well, it's kind of open space, feels like vacant land to me. And we look under the law to see what the definition of vacant land is, and it's kind of ambiguous. And the city, and so I'm thinking, well, usually the state would define it. If the state hasn't, maybe the city could define it, and we could define it to include golf courses. So I do a motion to get the city to look into that, and I do a motion to ask the state to clarify the definition of vacant land. Going through all these things, I also fly to Sacramento, and I meet with the governor's people to try to push this vacant land idea, and to make sure that they're aware of how important this is. And they're kind of skeptical of the vacant land thing. They have this whole pattern and practice, but they say they'll do a clarification. But they say their patterns of practice really, because there are the developed, what do you call them, the cartways, and there's a few buildings, that would mean it's not vacant land necessarily. So, well, maybe you can make it work that way. And then I also go and I meet with our state legislators, our representatives here, as well as I ask for a meeting and I meet with Buffy Wicks and Mike Fong, who are the authors of these bills. And I say to them, I say, look, I don't know if you intended this, but look what you're creating in my district, in a high fire severity zone, and I make the case of how this doesn't make any sense. And both of them said, oh, I can see what you're saying. That's not what the intent of this bill was. We didn't have this in mind at all. Even though it kind of fits like a glove, but that's what they tell me, that it's not the intended target. And while they and others are willing to do some follow-up legislation to change the underlying bills, we have a vesting problem. If the project is vested, even if they make some future changes in the laws, it may not prevent this project from moving forward. So I meet with them to try to get that to happen. I'm throwing a lot of things again. I'm trying to speed through this process. I gave you all a timeline which has all of these things. I don't think you want me to go through them all, but it goes through not only the timeline of the different things that we've done, but it goes through when the developer sent the letter to the city, when the city responded it was incomplete. We're now on the fourth incomplete. When the shot clock started and stopped, because that's been a key part of this. But let me cut straight to sort of, I think, what is the most important part, which is, what can we do and what is the hope that's out there? And I think the greatest hope right now for getting this project kicked back into a discretionary process are the mountain lions and the bats. And the reason I say that, and kudos to all of you and the collective for really bringing this to the forefront, because within the laws, it says the streamlined bills do not apply if it is endangered species habitat. Then the question is, what is endangered species habitat? So, of course, we turn to our experts at the MRCA, and Paul Edelman, who you mentioned, who I've had the good fortune to work with for many years. And he writes a great letter to the city, basically saying, hey, this is habitat. Now, you'd think it would be open and closed. Okay, we're done. It's not, nothing's ever that simple. So the city, meaning, when I say the city in this case, I mean the Department of Planning in coordination with the city attorney, because it's not discretionary, it doesn't go through any of these committees, it doesn't go through my hand. In fact, I really am prohibited from, I can't tell the department what to do. They have to make a professional judgment. But I met with them, and I'm making the case, and I am the advocate for, hey, this is habitat. So they are now they flagged that issue, and they sent it back to the developer, because this is what they have to do, and say, hey, show us, that this is not habitat. Now, we also have the opportunity to go and say, show us that it is habitat, and then they're going to have to make that decision. The tricky part is there has been some case law, I guess you could call it, where recently there was and I gave copies of this letter out in the back. There was a letter that the Attorney General did with regard to the city of Woodside. The city of Woodside tried to say that their entire city was habitat and that they didn't want to be subject to any of the state's housing laws. The Attorney General wrote a letter and said, that's nonsense, you can't make your whole city off limits, every other city has to do these laws. And unfortunately, he also said in that letter, and I provided a copy for all of you, in that letter he said, just roaming on the land does not count as habitat. Just being seen on the land does not count as habitat. You have to biologically show that this is habitat. Now it seems, to the layperson, it seems kind of, I would think, if you're roaming, that's your habitat, but the Attorney General said in a letter that you need more than that. So the MRCA and Conservancy are going back and trying to really spell it out clearly. But the planning department, again, the developer they have to return their letter back to the city, and I'm sure they're going to make a case, and they're going to hire fancy people with degrees, and they're going to write a big thick report saying that it's not habitat. And then ultimately, with the city attorney's advice, the planning department is going to have to make that decision. And the reason why that decision is so crucial is because the planning department has to decide if the application is complete. And I also gave you a document that shows what it means to be complete, all the different things that they need to provide. They've provided most of them, so they're going to be able to do that. But then the housing department has to also say, or planning department, whether it's in compliance with state and federal law. And that's where the habitat piece comes in, because if we can show that it's mountain lion habitat or bat habitat, then that can potentially kick the project back into discretionary. Although even that's not so simple. The mountain lion habitat would be the ideal, but the bat habitat really is about the trees that are there. And so the developer could go back to the drawing board, because they're allowed to cure under the system, and they could just put circles around all the trees and say that area is not being touched. And they could then submit it back, and they would get, that issue would be removed. I think it's harder if it's mountain lion habitat, because the mountain lions are running all over the place, to get that development, to cut out the parts that are mountain lion habitat. So I think that is the most promising. There were a few other things that the housing department kicked it back to the developer to cure, essentially. One of them has to do with affordable housing. In the developer's proposal, they put all the affordable housing into one location. And under the law, under state law, you can't do that. You have to spread it out throughout the project. So the developer has to revamp their project in order to do that. But that is something that is what's called curable. I mean, they could fairly easily do that. Now, maybe it won't pencil out if they do that. That'd be great. But I'm sure they're creative enough to figure out a way for that to happen. So there are a few little things like that that the planning department kicked back to them that they probably can find a way to cure. The one I think that is most promising that they may not be able to find a way to cure is the mountain lions. And that's kind of where we're at. I can tell you want me to stop, so I can stop there and we can have more discussion.
Let me just jump in for a sec. So what Bob is talking about, this has been a long and lengthy process, and there have been a lot of letters, and the two groups, the collective and the alliance, have been letter writing. We've been talking to our representatives. You've been getting our emails, so you've seen what's going on. You've seen who we're talking to. You've probably seen that the mayor has been out here now. The mayor has seen this for herself. Unfortunately, the way the city is structured, this is not something that the mayor can do a lot for us, other than, like Bob is doing, talking to other people. You may be wondering, why aren't we hiring our own attorneys? Well, we have hired attorneys. So the collective, which is us up here, we're represented by Sabrina Venskis and Associates, and the alliance is represented by Jamie Hall. And like Bob was saying, the mountain lions, Jamie Toskis, who heads up the alliance, was working with Jamie Hall, and they took statements from people who've seen mountain lions, and they've done a big write-up, and that has gone with the cover letter from the attorney to the planning department. And like Bob was saying also, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and MERCA, everyone's been involved and a lot of letters have been sent. And we've really vetted this, you know, item by item, going through these letters that have been coming from Planning Department. You know, we've been sitting in meetings, all of us, looking to see what will work. So why are we here? Why did we gather everybody? So the reason we wanted to gather everyone is like what Bob was saying. This last letter, the fourth letter, is a big downer. And the reason why it's a big downer is because we're running out of options. Now, just like, and for those of you who have not seen maps of the development, so it's about 400 homes that are going to go in at the very north end of the course. And their driveway is going to be on Canoga. It's 4868 Canoga is where the driveway is going to be. 400 homes is probably about 900 vehicles. So 900 vehicles going in and out of Canoga. And for those of us that live south, and even north, and even west and east, just imagine 900 extra vehicles. Imagine also 900 extra vehicles if there's an emergency and we have to evacuate. And emergency vehicles are trying to make their way up.
No.
I heard my name. I heard Alex No. It sounded like my mom. So that's, you know, like we were saying, responsible development, right? Responsible development means that they follow CEQA. And that's all that we're asking for. We're not saying no development.
But by the way, you mentioned the mayor's office. I want to give kudos to the mayor and some of the mayor's team are here in the back because the mayor came out to meet with us last week, and it has been very helpful to have the mayor. And I've had many discussions with the mayor about this, and her helping weigh in on this and backing us up on this is huge, and that helps. You know, the planning department has to be independent, but it definitely helps keep the pressure going so that folks don't just do the easy path and just approve this, but instead they really, you know, cross every T, dot every I, and hopefully feel the pressure.
Yeah,
Does Mayor Ross support us? Because I know that the owners have also not supported, I mean, rumor, but, you know, it's like, I would like to know that. If on official word, is she able to say, yes, we support this cause? I think it's a pretty good question.
that's a good question. I'm going to save it for the top of the question period. Great question. That's okay. You spoke what's on your mind.
I'm saying she can't do anything. I just
Yeah.
think
Yeah, we'll circle back, but I wanted to address, Bob, you were saying that we were looking, like we wanted you to wrap it up. I was just counting how many terms you use, and I think you actually, I wrote the term sheet, used a term I didn't even define. So I'm sure everyone's trying to follow along, but it's a huge amount of
I'm happy to
information.
help translate. Sorry
Yeah,
if I use too much I mean, I try not to speak in gobbledygook and acronyms.
Oh no, but precision is nice. But what do you mean by cure? I think that's the one term I didn't define for them.
Okay, so it's more of a legal term, but it means that they have the ability to fix. So when the planning department says, you know, your affordable housing is in the wrong spot, if they said, okay, it was in the wrong spot, and then they could just stamp disapproved, that would be great. But they don't get to do that. They have to say, it's in the wrong spot. You want to fix it? And then they have a certain number of days to fix it, and then it gets sent back to the planning department, and the planning department has a shot clock on days to approve it. So when it ends is if we say, the city says, you want to fix that? And then they either say no, or the timeline runs out and they can't fix it or cure it. But that's the sort of the legal term in terms of being able to fix something, given that opportunity.
So we also talked a little bit about Sacramento. What can Sacramento do? This is a state issue. It came from the state, and it's up to the state to help us, and the state has been silent. You've seen it in our emails we've talked about. We have asked the mayor, letters have been written for an emergency order for a carve-out just for our specific neighborhood. Not for all of it, but very, very specific for this. We've asked for an emergency order. You've seen the emails, you've seen the letters. There's a petition going around. Let's make sure we sign that.
But just to be clear, The city cannot do an emergency order to carve out.
The state.
I just want to be clear,
Yeah.
what you're asking for is for the state
Yes.
to do an emergency order to carve out. Because I don't know if that was clear, just because if that was an option, I'd be pursuing it if the city could do that.
No, it has to come from the state. It has to come from the state. So that is one avenue. And that has to happen soon because the clock is ticking on the response. We're going to get into your questions, but here's what I wanted to also add. It's not the end. Like I said, we are represented by attorneys. So if this does get approved, then it becomes a legal battle. And by the way, that's not abnormal for these kinds of things. A lot of times when we're talking, we talk to Bob, we talk to other people. Sometimes that is how these things are settled, they're settled through litigation.
In fact, I go a step further. This will go to court either way. Because if we can get the city, the planning department, to say this does not qualify for AB 2011 because of the mountain lines, the developer, I can bet you 100 to 1, will sue and say you did something wrong. So it's going to be in the courts. The question is whether the city is going to be sued by the folks in this room or is going to be sued by the developer. And I'd much rather the city to be sued by the developer and for the community and the city to be on the same legal side and to move forward. That'll also be a little cheaper for all of you. But that either way, I guarantee this thing is going to court.
So that being said, like I said, we do have attorneys that we're being represented by. We do not want to come out and ask you for fundraising right now. We want to wait to see what happens. And we will keep you informed. But either way, if we have to go the attorney route, there's going to be a lot of bake sales. And all kidding aside, this isn't going to be inexpensive. And regardless of where you live, if you look at the map and you say, oh, this development is pretty far from me. I'm at the far south end. Well, guess what? It's going to come to you. They're going to develop all of it. It's going to happen. And that's what we're trying to do. And look, I can only speculate. Right, and that's what I was just going to say. So going back to the current development, one of the big fears for that current development is that they're going to be introducing a lot of homes and a lot of traffic, and this neighborhood is already taxed. We do not, if you remember my presentation from before, we don't have the same infrastructure that the Palisades has. Our streets are narrow, the Canoga is a big-time bottleneck. This is not the same place. Responsible development is not as many homes, looking at everything, looking to see how to make it safe for the people that already live here. And that's what we're going for. Let's make it private property. They're allowed to develop, but let's make it safe. Let's go through the proper channels to make it safe for the people that are already living here.
So you touched on this, both of you, so I want to pull us back because Bob, you correctly gave us a chance to clarify our language. Can you tell us more about this fourth letter and the introduction of the term complete? Alex mentioned it's a bit of a buzzkill. I agree, it ruined my day. But tell us, we had 3 letters, incomplete, inconsistent, in, and now we're at complete, but still inconsistent.
Right. And complete means that they have submitted all the documents, and I believe we also gave you a letter of exactly what those documents are, so I have a handout for that. And if all the handouts run out, anybody emails my office, we will send you all the handouts if you missed getting them today. But we go through, it's a checklist of things that they have to submit. Well, they've submitted them. But, as I said, the planning department has not signed off on their submittals. In fact, on the affordable housing, there were several, there's the big ones that they set and signed off on. Is the biggest one, of course, is the habitat. But then things like the affordable housing are other elements of it where, yes, they submitted how they're doing the affordable housing, but the planning department said, well, it's not, you might have completed that, but you need to fix it.
This seems to be pretty slow for a fast track. It's been 7 months. Now that it's incomplete, is there a different set of shot clocks, or we're just going to relive the same groundhog 60 days over and over until I'm retired?
Well, that would be wonderful if we had that kind of ability to just stall this forever. But unfortunately, no. I mean, they're gonna come back, and the developer is gonna submit its reasoning why it's not habitat. They're gonna come back, and they're gonna have a plan that meets the problems that have been set by pointed out by the planning department vis-a-vis the affordability. And then we're gonna have that 60-day shot clock. Unless some other thing pops up where that buys us another 30 days or something. But now is the critical time because, well, the developer has it. Once they submit it back to the city, we have those 60 days, and that's during that time frame. That's when the department and the city attorney, in terms of legally, is going to have to decide who they want to be sued by. I mean, they're going to have to decide whether it's habitat or not.
Okay, so I've been looking through some of the questions from the neighbors. I think we've gotten through quite a few of these. I know one thing that people are wondering is, how do you see all the letters? Where do you see all the documents? The website is right here. Everything is there on the website. Some of you may be wondering, well, we've already donated. What happened to the money? So just to let you know, both groups have retained attorneys. So we paid for retainer fees. We've had the attorneys looking over the documents that we've been sending around. We have to pay for the website. We've had to do taxes. My son is not here, but thank you to him and Jackie for putting our taxes together. He's an accountant. But we're going to come back for more. We're going to keep you updated. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of baking in this neighborhood, either way. And if it goes in our favor and the developer sues the city and that gets overturned, we are right back to where we are. So this is not, it's not that easy to say, oh great, we've overcome. Questions?
I have a question. What is the plan for the development on the west side of Canoga for those holes that are away from the main country club that you have to cross over Canoga, the empty space? What would become of that? Those 6 holes or 3 holes that are up there?
So the developer has come back and said in their documents, I'd like to give the mic to Bob, but I would say that the application has been very specific. It is just for this area.
The golf course as it is now on the other side,
Well, eventually, I mean, the developer hasn't revealed all of their plans to us yet, but we know that they're going to develop. Once if they get this done, they're going to just keep going. They're going to want to develop most of it. So I couldn't tell you exactly what their plan is for that. We know what they have proposed to the city, and that's public documents. But we don't know what they would propose on some of those other acres, because part of the state law is it has to be 20 acres or less. So they proposed something that was 19.9 acres. They get that approved, and then they're going to come back, next year, and if they are successful, and try to use this fast track for another 20 acres.
So it's a total of 90 acres. There's a project plan for under 20, so there's another 70 to be developed. I'm going to start here and go this way.
They're actually actively pursuing a lot split to split off that part of the development. So once that happens, and that's another thing that they're going to have to get through the city, but that will likely happen. And once they split that off, the other thing is, if anyone's wondering, you cannot have a golf course with that part developed. So it will no longer be a golf course.
Yeah, I have a question. Obviously, I think most of us are not opposed to affordable housing in an appropriate and safe place. But the emphasis tonight seems to be on, going with whatever's going to help us. And in this case, establishing the fact that possibly mountain lions and bats are endemic and live on the golf course. But is it because of the ministerial process that's being skipped that safety's now out the door?
Yes.
I'm terrified. We're all going to burn to a crisp.
Yeah.
And I think that's the major issue for
And
both of us.
unfortunately, when you look through the letters, and you're, like I said, go to the website, look through the letters, that part of it, the fire part of it, is specifically removed.
How?
The new AB laws specifically removed that aspect of the 2011. 2011 was not a bad bill, but the new bills specifically removed that.
That was my question. How is it possible that the high fire danger isn't enough of a reason?
Oh, it's my turn. One of the things that I've been researching developments of old country clubs, and one of the problems is that anything built, any country club that was around from before 1970 is so polluted with heavy metals, pesticides that are illegal and permanent, herbicides, every kind of pollutant that you can imagine. And it's in there and it gets in the groundwater, and the houses north of Dumetz are probably soaking in it, the houses around the two-finger golf courses out there. Why isn't anybody testing the soil? That once they start excavating, all of this stuff is going to be in the air as dust.
So that's the normal process. So it's a very important point to raise, but those steps happen if we're in the regular discretionary process.
Yeah,
Is that right, Bob?
Health concerns should be.
They're still going to have to do some testing when they start building and getting building permits, so there will be some of that. But in terms of the approval process, because then they can mitigate and they can do all sorts of things. So there will be some testing that they're going to have to go through. But normally, before you approve a project, you have to meet the California Environmental Quality Act, which requires a number of these questions to be examined. And unfortunately, these bills are an end run around this California Environmental Quality Act. And this goes back to a much bigger issue about there's been a need for big push for housing. There's been a lot of concerns that CEQA has been abused, and so there's been a lot of bills coming out of the state to end run CEQA. CEQA is one of our most important environmental laws in the state of California that we've ever. We all agree with you. She's saying we shouldn't be able to go around that.
But isn't
agree.
that the lawsuit right there? They're jeopardizing all of our health, the excavation, and the health of the people that are here.
There's plenty of ways. You can always sue, and I know we will, but in terms of the California Environmental Quality Act, that is a state law, and when you have another state law that says you don't have to use it in these cases, the other state law, the more recent state law, is going to prevail because it says it's an exemption to the previous one. If there's a federal law, that's different, and maybe there's some federal laws out there with the environment that won't be preempted by the state law. But that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down.
The AQMD should be involved.
Okay, myself, Jackie, and Rebecca Brown, we filled out and worked really diligently on historical, cultural monument application. Hours and hours of research and a lot of really good stuff. Is there anything that you or BAS can do? We were told that it is locked, that they can't officially intake the application while the permits are pending and going through this process. As a social studies teacher, credentialed 28 years, and just someone that loves history. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke here first time West Coast. Nixon gave a speech at that club. Reagan gave his gubernatorial speech, not to mention William Bell, pioneer of architecture in Palos Verdes, where I formerly lived part-time. I was a teacher. So I know about William Bell from all of our many, many local history projects because he also designed Palos Verdes Country Club. It's just, on top of all of these issues, it breaks my heart to see history decimated.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have a lot of anything anymore. But my question, thank you, is, I had to just share that. Is there anything you or your offices or Mayor Bass can do? Is that, I just can't really find the wording of why they can't be accepted.
The question is about the historical application.
Yeah, your question is, can it be made designated as a historic site?
Yeah, we submitted the application, but it's just sitting.
I got you. Because part of the rules are once a project has been submitted, you can't then, after the fact, do a historical designation. But also, just so you know, even if we did a historical designation beforehand, that wouldn't stop the development. The historical designation adds an additional step that the developers have to pay homage to the historic purpose, but there's lots of ways to do that. So it might slow it down a beat or two, but it wouldn't stop it. So, and we're faced with the fact that you're not allowed to do it after the fact. And this kind of thing came up, the Bothwell Ranch, the last orange grove in the city. I was very involved in trying to preserve that. And when that first was proposed for development, I used that exact technique. I threw it out before it got proposed, and I said, let's make it a historic site, make the orange groves historic. It was kind of shaky then, because it's hard to make orange groves historic. Long story short, we ended up, again, working with the Conservancy, my friends and allies from before. We managed to get a deal where we preserved a third of it, making it into a museum and preserving the third of those groves, and then they developed the other 2/3, but we saved the last orange grove in the city. But we used that historic designation, to start things off, but it was never going to be a silver bullet. We knew that going in. And even in this case, I love the way you're thinking, but it wouldn't be a silver bullet, and on top of that, we're prohibited. And part of it's because we all got caught off guard, because nobody thought this, I don't imagine anyone here, myself included, knew that there was going to be these state bills that would allow this to circumvent the normal process.
I'm going to ask a form question from online, but I want to give credit, Nicole. It was an amazing application, and if anyone would love to learn more about our beautiful historic monument to be, if it ever gets to be approved, I would definitely recommend learning from Nicole. The question I wanted to ask from the pre-submission was, how is it possible for a high-density housing project to be built in an area where we residents are already scrambling to get fire insurance? We've been dropped because we live in high fire zones. There you go. What do you One of you wrote this question, so I hope whoever wrote it is hearing the applause. So what can we expect to happen with this development and our insurance going forward?
Well, it's a great point. amen, right? It's insane. It shouldn't be developed with this kind of density. I can say, I'm in 100% agreement. How can it happen? It can happen because we had these state laws that, written by folks, many of whom were in Sacramento. Or Northern California. When I talked to Buffy Wicks about it, I was explaining. I'm like, you do realize, the landscape is they don't understand. The landscape is very different in the valley out here. We have these little spaghetti streets, and they're thinking of the grids in Northern California in a very different concept of what, the implications would be. So, the question of how could this possibly happen, it defies logic, and it shouldn't happen.
And what should we do about our home?
So as somebody who bought here not that many years ago, I can tell you that my home insurance has become one of the, aside from property taxes, has become one of the biggest expenses on my tiny little house. And the other thing is, when I look at my policy, I can tell you that it would not pay if my house burned down to build another one just like it. I'd have less than half the house. So this is where we stand. And this is why we're trying to get an emergency order from the governor. This is why it's important when we send out emails and we ask you to sign a petition or we ask you to write an email, and as a community, Jackie keeps totals on numbers. So she is fantastic with analytics. And I can tell you that she could probably write a book about how to do this and how to get people to respond and do the right thing. Just the fact that all of you are here tonight is an amazing thing. So we're trying to do what we're trying to do.
Question over here, Alex.
Why can't you change the bill? Why can't you work to change that bill?
So it was...
or the respect from the city.
And I agree with you 100%. I'm going to turn it over to Bob, and he's going to explain best.
Yeah, so you say, why can't the city change this bill?
Where's our reps?
Right, so
Our state reps.
the state rep, I can't as a city council member change a state bill, obviously. I can advocate for it, and I have. In fact, I did a motion, which is, again, one of the documents I handed out, asking the state to do just that, and to put it. We also need to do that, but even if we change this moving forward, it may not, it takes a long time for a state bill to get enacted. So if tomorrow everyone in the state agreed with us and they changed the law,
Thank you for your question. Bob, finish, please.
You're right.
I didn't hear the second part of what he said.
That's on the state side. Bob's on the city side. Alex,
Yes,
do you want to talk
but
about
absolutely, we should advocate for changes to the law to move it forward. I totally agree that we want to change the law so that certainly as these future ones that you're talking about, that we'll have more tools in our toolbox.
What did Buffy say when you explained it to her?
Okay, I'm happy to answer the question, but I know that the moderators here probably want to keep order, and I'm happy to answer the questions that are yelled out or answer it the way that you want.
No tomatoes. I heard tomatoes were mentioned, but I have a very bad hearing, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So if we can give those of us with very bad hearing a chance to hear everyone, things will go more clearly and quickly. So let's let Bob and Alex say something, but just for all of us with impaired hearing, let's be respectful.
Okay, so the question's come up, and it's come up. We have been attempting to work, and from early on, Bob talked about this. Your representative in California is Jesse Gabriel. And we have been going after his office. And we have met with his office. We've met with them twice now. And we've asked them to get involved. And as you have seen in your emails, we actually invited them to come here and speak to all of you as well. And they have been non-responsive.
Wasn't he responsible for writing those two bills?
He was a signer, and his office did work on the bills. Now that being said, again, you have to look at the history of it. 2011 is not a bad bill. The bills that followed it, those are the bad bills, at least for our area. And like I said, we have not been ignoring the fact that, to try and get our representative to represent us, and they've been non-responsive.
He's not the author of those two bills. It was Buffy Wicks and Mike Fong are the ones who authored the bills that are causing the issues. And again, I don't know that the folks in the legislature, it took us weeks to figure out, like through my office doing the forensics, that how these bills even impacted, because it really was buried. I mean, whoever did this, if they intended to do it, was very ingenious or diabolical, I guess is a better word.
Yeah, a quick, hold on everyone, a quick point of order, quick point of order.
People want to talk. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Stop yelling
We've asked you multiple times to stop it.
Thank you.
Adults, come on. Okay, quick point of order. We have many mailing lists. We have very responsive community engagers. When you email our mailing list, you're talking to Allison. So if anyone has something they want to say to Jesse right now, that's going in an email. We've got Bob here, so let's ask Bob specific questions, including what we can do differently. We've sent letters, we've gone to their office. Bob, what do you think we could be doing differently to engage the state? And anyone who has an idea of how to engage the state, email Allison, because that is how you're going to get it documented.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think engaging the state is critical. Both, you know, we have an assembly office and we also have a Senate office that represents us. Henry Stern has been responsive on this. So, you know, I would definitely encourage working with all of our reps. And the governor. The governor does represent us as well. You know, as I said, I've gone up and met with his team, and I know that you guys have sent them letters as well, because when I went up there, they mentioned that, which was great. But and I think that is, those are the three that directly represent us in Sacramento, which is the governor, well, and frankly, the Attorney General too. The Attorney General, you know, is weighing in on some of this. As I mentioned, a critical decision on the habitat comes from the letter that the Attorney General wrote to the city of Woodside. So if the Attorney General is willing to write a letter like that, you know, ideally, the Attorney General could weigh in about this. So we have representatives that we need to talk to and encourage to help get some rationality put back into this.
Jesse Gabriel's office. Tomorrow we're going to send out a petition that goes to the governor, if you all could sign that. Also, Henry Stern has been really supportive. Jesse Gabriel has been non-responsive. Jesse.
Well, first of all, I have to say thank you. I really have to acknowledge. Highly emotional, obviously, experience. And, oh, sorry. I'm saying this is a highly emotional experience for all of us that live here. And how to turn over, if each one of us did something, you know, and what the focus of that doing should be. We feel helpless in a lot of ways. We write a letter. I know money is needed, that's obvious. Help us focus on what is essential and can move the needle. And thank you so much, all of you.
So, at this point, keep an eye on your email. Look for the collective, look for the alliance, look for things that we're asking for you to do. And at some point, and it's going to be probably sooner than later, we're going to come to you and we're going to ask you to donate. And we're going to talk about it. And we're going to tell you what we're going to do with it. We're going to tell you as much as we can, you know, what we're thinking, you know, what the lawyers are going to tell us. We're going to get represented. That's kind of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the legal side is definitely coming, so that's a big part of this. And then, even if you go through the legal process, and let's say you win 100%, that doesn't end it. That just kicks it then into the discretionary process, which is a process. And even though I chair the Planning and Land Use Committee, I don't get to control that process completely. And, frankly, that process will probably happen if it gets to it after I'm out of office, because I'm termed out at the end of December of this year. And so part of it's also talking to the folks who are running for this seat as well, making sure that they're well versed, because this issue is going to go beyond my term. I know Tim Gaspar was here somewhere. Is Tim, are you still here? But make sure that you talk to those folks, because, you know, I'm 100% there, but you want to make sure that whoever succeeds me is also there, because that's critical in land use decisions. The most important voice is the community as represented by their representative in the city in the normal process. Obviously, this process has been hijacked, but it's
Great. Bob, it sounds like endurance and advocate your elected reps. Question from Ann here.
Hi, you said that you've already talked to some of these people up at the state level, that you've made aware of the consequences, the unintended consequences of this, but what did they say? Should we be lobbying them? Was there any reaction from them, or did they just blow it off?
No, I mean, they listened to me. That's the most important. You know, I didn't even know if they would be willing to meet with me, because these are folks who don't represent our area. But I was able to get that audience. They were able to tell me that this was not, I thought it was important to know whether this was the target, or at least to have them state it one way or the other, because if this was the target, then it would be a different discussion. But both Buffy Wicks and Mike Fong said no, that they had no idea about this project, and that this was not the intended target of their legislation. They went on to explain the legislation. And I said, well, would you be amenable if we could come up with a change? And they both said they would be amenable to a fix. Now, they didn't go about and feel it was their responsibility to go fix it, but they basically said that they would be amenable, which is a big deal, because then when I went to the governor's office and talked about how we need to have a fix, the first question they asked me is, oh, am I going to be fought by the authors? And I said, well, I just met with the authors, and they both said that they would be amenable to a fix. You know, so it's a stepping process. So neither of them, you know, said, oh, this is terrible, I'm going to go write legislation tomorrow and fix it. But they did at least, you know, their first reaction, frankly, was to try to dismiss me as a NIMBY. And then I went through and I said, that's not the case. And I talked about what we've done in this district, and you know, all the things, and how we, you know, how I personally promoted housing and affordable housing, and what we've done in the Warner Center, and sort of got them, you know, a little bit more sympathetic, and then went into it and tried to show them, you know, what we're looking at. And that's where at least we got their mind open a little bit.
Thanks, Bob. We have Jamie Toscas from the Woodland Hills Landwise Alliance.
I just wanted to give you guys a little more background, because I know you have a lot of questions about how this legislation gets passed. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that close to 80% of the legislation that's enacted in our entire country is actually drafted by special interest groups. It's not drafted by the people who you voted for. Okay, so I actually met with Buffy Wicks's legislative director, Steve Wertheim, right when this first happened, and I too got called a NIMBY, and then I had to fire back and tell him that we have 20,000 plus units going in less than a mile away, and he got very quiet, and the first thing out of his mouth was, well, this land is vacant. This isn't intended to be used by our bills, or to this project does not apply to this bill. And I said, well, Steve, where does it say that in your amendments? Because the amendments have no preamble, no language, no nothing that clarifies that. So, of course, you have to understand, Sacramento is heavily invested in YIMBY. And if you don't know what YIMBY is, it's the opposite of NIMBY. And it's the yes in my backyard, but when you look deeper, it's really big development and big tech. That's who's driving this. It is kind of, I hate to use that expression, but it is kind of an industrial complex. I also met with the Attorney General's office, 4 different people from DOJ. And you know, you kind of get the runaround, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. They say, oh, we'll talk to HCD, which is Housing and Community Development. And you get stonewalled. And what you really have to, I really want to drive home is this is our state. This is the legislation they are pushing. They are heavily embedded with YIMBY and big development. And you even look at, you know, the LA Business Council, even some of our local agencies promote this kind of thing. And it's a shame because the communities like ours, we're stuck organizing and having to hire attorneys. And I will give you, I'll give you one more example. I was at a wedding a couple weeks ago. There was the son of a big developer, and this project came up. And I said, yeah, they enacted legislation that seems to be crafted for this project. And they all laughed at me. So it's been very eye-opening and very interesting. And I think, you know, what you can do moving forward is, you know, sign the petition. We put a petition out in a letter to the governor. I think you guys are going to pass it along. And that
We'll email out that petition tomorrow. Sorry, we have so many questions.
One quick.
Okay, the lady with the bad ears is going to talk louder. So Jamie wins the same prize Bob did. That was not on the term sheet. I'm sorry, I couldn't make it more than 4 pages. So the 2 acronyms, if you're not so well versed, Jamie said YIMBY. That's with a Y. Y-I-M-B-Y. And the term we're talking about, NIMBY, which has been thrown at us, not in my backyard, is N-I-M-B-Y. And YIMBY is actually an organization that has codified around that term. So shout out to both of you. I wish I could have a 5-page term sheet, but we've got a question.
So I live right behind the golf course, and I am insured with California Fair Plan. And raise your hands, people insured California Fair Plan. Okay. I imagine they all live around the golf course, correct? Yeah. I have a house roughly worth $1 million. It says I have a house worth roughly $1 million bucks on Zillow. I'm offered $159,000 replacement value through California Fair Plan maximum, and I cannot get any more. Who is going to insure this property, and will the homeowners that buy this property be disclosed the information that they're not going to be able to get the replacement value for the price of their property?
Well said.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I mean, I'm a homeowner too. I'm in the same boat, and we're all rather.
Who's insuring the project?
I don't know who's insuring the project. But I mean,
It says 10 out of 10 on the Zillow for high-risk fire.
All right, I don't think we're going to have an answer for that, so let's move on to the next question.
it's a great question. It's just there's not a good answer, and that's part of the problem is that we all recognize that it doesn't make any sense, and that it's going to be very difficult to insure.
If you go to the website and you look through the letters, the developer's response to that is they're going to do fire hardening on the homes that they're building. And I can tell you that those same fire-hardened homes burned in the Palisades next to the ones that were not fire-hardened. But that was their response, and that's what they're going to do to cure it.
Thank you so much again for being here today and listening to the concerns of our community. Over and over we've heard about how CEQA doesn't apply here, but this got me thinking, the federal version of that NEPA looks like it should apply for a few reasons, and I wonder if it's been looked at. First of all, the National Fish and Wildlife Service said that they have mapped wetlands that are endangered in the area, including it looks like there appears to be one that runs through the country club. If it does, it immediately triggers a NEPA environmental review. I don't know if that's been looked at. And additionally, any project that receives federal funding also triggers a NEPA environmental review. And it appears that they said that there's going to be low-income housing. I'm not sure if it's Section 8, but it doesn't even matter if it's Section 8. If there's a penny of federal funding that goes into this, it requires a NEPA federal environmental review. And I want to know, has that been looked at as something that needs to be done?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I do think that I don't think that there's any federal funds being used in this project, so I don't think that would trigger it. If there's a way to get NEPA, usually CEQA they say covers NEPA in most of these planning things. But I'm happy to have my planning team look into that. If there's any, I'll throw anything against the wall. I wish if that's a silver bullet, great. I don't think it will be, but we're happy to try to figure it out. I think usually when they do CEQA, they say it's in place of or covers NEPA, but we're happy to look.
Are you willing to do research for us? Great.
Hi. I'll make this brief. I think this is a fait accompli. I believe that it's going to happen, and the only thing that will possibly stop it is going to be litigation. I don't think a lot of what we're doing here, unfortunately, is going to have a huge effect. I think the project is going to be relighted, and I do believe that we're going to wind up in court. room remember where this is all coming from, which is Sacramento, and also remember we have an election coming up in November.
Real quick, I know that was a statement, but I do want to respond to part of it. You mentioned that maybe this meeting doesn't have a purpose or an outcome that is productive. It does, because we are showing that we are together and that we are strong and that we're not afraid to go to litigation together. And that is something worth doing.
And I also want to mention, as you've probably seen, the cameras are here. So everyone's well aware of how organized we are. And like I said before, with the analytics that we're getting, this is a community that's very special. This is a community that, and I've lived in a few communities, and I can tell you that the people that are here, I'm always impressed with how this community comes in, how it supports, and the type of people that live here, and how smart all of you are, and how involved all of you are. And we are going to be taking advantage of that. We're going to need that. That is something we're going to need. We're going to need you to stay strong, and we're going to need you to stay active.
So you mentioned that the biology report is our kind of like only hope at this point, the biology report. So I'm wondering, because this developer has been convicted for violating campaign finance laws. And I'm wondering if there's any way we can ensure that the biologist that is being used is not being corrupted by this sketchy individual. And I apologize if I'm using the word sketchy, but I don't have any other words.
That's a great question. The reports are on the website, and the planning letters are there. We can't comment as to their biologist, but obviously they're going to have experts on their side that are going to, speak their language. And we've been represented, I think, by the most reputable biologists and teams. And thank you again to Paul. And that's all we can do.
It's no small matter that the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, which is a state agency, and the Mountains Recreation Conservation Authority, which is a joint powers authority, meaning it's state and local government, that they are weighing in, that speaks volumes. Now, hopefully, that means tie goes to the runner, tie goes to the state in that case, if both sides make the equally compelling argument, I would hope. But that goes in our favor, and I'm an optimist hoping that will have an impact. But as you mentioned, they're going to hire somebody to, and I'm sure they're going to, pay the money, and they're not going to pay the money to say what they don't want to say. They're going to pay the money to say what they want them to say. So then it's going to be, a question of a fair looking at all of that evidence, and then lawsuits to follow to say that whatever way they decide that they're going to say is wrong.
I just want to clarify, we got 3 biologists in play for those of you watching this like it's a sports game. We got the developer's biologist, we have the state's biologist, our SECA trustee agency, the SMMC, and we have a privately hired independent biologist. So there's a lot of biologists in play. Thank you, SMMC, for that. But just know that there's not just the one biologist.
Hi, I've lived in the Woodland Hills area for 43 years and have always been very proud of our community. And sometimes when I come and listen to this, I don't know whether our community is being defended as hard as it should be. And of dealing with fires, and we deal with, of course, fires, earthquakes, mountain lions, but I don't know if I've heard or read on the email, because I try to keep up with it, how this affects Serenia Elementary School, Woodland Hills Elementary School. As a retired teacher for 27 years, you see the impact from the standpoint classrooms get split. The kind of classrooms that parents go crazy when their brilliant child, no offense, gets put into a 2-3 split. And it's also very impossible for the teacher. Teachers are running really, really low. Supplies come out of the teacher's pocket. And where is the developer on this? Where is the city with LAUSD as far as supplying money to these schools? These are city schools, and they're going to be impacted also, but by the amount of children and cars that are going to be coming into this area. It's not just the fire part that scares us to death, but there's other minor or micro, I guess, things that we maybe haven't even stopped and thought about yet. And thank you.
She makes good points. Those are the kinds of things that would come up if we actually had a discretionary process, we had a hearing, we were looking at all the factors, those kinds of things would come up. Some of them are arguments that don't typically work in development cases, some of them are arguments that do, but at least we can have that discussion. We can't have that discussion under the state expedited process.
I have two questions, simple questions. Does the city at this point have any discussion as far as internal situation within the development, especially ingress from the proposed development, meaning that if you could have a secondary exit from the development, then there wouldn't be an issue right at the west and Canoga. Not internal as much, but secondary egress, not just one egress.
That makes a lot of sense. Again,
With a small amount of fees, since then we're able to take it directly into a bank account. There's an option to give a single time or a reoccurring payment on our website. But I want to highlight the city's emails, the bills that the city sends out, those have been spoofed by scammers successfully. So just be very mindful. Scammers are very smart. Talk to us, talk to Landwise Alliance, make sure you're sending money into a place that's legit, because if you get victim of a scam, we can't unfortunately help you because that's money going somewhere else. But next question.
Just further to about the vesting question, I imagine if they can't do the second and third tranches or however they plan rolling out, that it will even be worth their while financially for all the infrastructure and stuff they're going to have to do. But speaking of money, I feel like one way we could maybe engage other communities is the fact that the majority of us can't get insurance on California Fair Plan. That raises every person in California's insurance, because eventually they're going to run out. There will be a fire worse than what we've already seen in Altadena and the Palisades, and everybody's insurance rates are going to go up. So, it's not just our fight, it's everybody's fight, and I think if we spread that message a little bit, that might be helpful. People are already stretched, financially. So, thank you for everything you do.
I want to let Bob answer that question too, but I want to acknowledge we've learned from the folks that came before us in previous concerns that communities came up against. Bob had outlined that we are the canary in this coal mine, but the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Organization has been very much at it for a long time, and they've formed a mega group called United Neighbors, and they have been down at the same plum meetings for city council advocating for all of us. So right now you're talking to us, but we're happy to connect you to those groups of neighbors who have learned and taught us what they know, who are trying to take on that larger conversation. But we'll happily connect you with them. Do you have any comments to add, Bob?
They're a good source. They've been around for a long time. In fact, I went and spoke to the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association a couple of weeks ago, and I told them about this situation, and I wanted to make sure that they also understood not only what we were facing here, but that how it impacts them as well. They were very interested in getting engaged.
My question is, considering the size of this project, wouldn't be subject to environmental impact and traffic study reports? And if those reports don't support this project, would you reject the project?
I don't get to reject or approve this project under the state bills. If it gets thrown back into the city's discretionary process, then exactly that. We would go through the environmental laws, and they would have to meet certain requirements, and the city would have to certify the CEQA, whether it's a negative declaration or whether it's an environmental impact study. That is the normal process. That's the rational process that goes through. The state bill is circumventing that so that we don't get to look at those environmental laws prior to the project being approved. There will be some ways, after the project, if hopefully it doesn't get approved, but if it were to get approved, when they're building, there's some of those environmental laws would have to be looked at. But the important part about prior to approval only happens when the city has discretion, meaning it's not done ministerially.
But what you mentioned before that like 900 cars will go through Canova Avenue, wouldn't it be an obstacle to this?
That's the problem with this particular area. That's the issue here. If this was a strip mall somewhere in the middle of California, it wouldn't be a problem. But this particular area, that's the issue. We call it irresponsible development, but that's what these laws allow them to do.
Thank you.
We have to give the church back, so we got to make this quick now.
First, I wanted to thank you for your leadership and your leadership here and organizing this event and your engagement, and also the councilman for being the guest speaker answering questions. Quick thought, if we are hinging our hope on wildlife here, that's pretty bleak. So I would turn it to you, and maybe everybody else. Everybody's asking you questions, right? I think we should ask ourselves questions what we can do, okay? Because ultimately, it's the city, but there's people, also the state, making decisions about our future and lives here, okay? So I think, yes, legal route, we can explore all of this, but maybe we should think of a picket. Maybe people who will be making these decisions, they have to see some visuals, like there's plenty of from Palisades, maybe assisted with AI even. Send them how this neighborhood would look if a fire rages through it, okay? So,
You meant in the beginning, we're hinging on wildlife here. What are the other ideas?
Right, and so we did, like I said earlier, we did explore that. We brought that to the legislators. We explored it. The problem is that the way that these laws were written, the risk to fire does not factor in.
I understand. I'm saying we should maybe send people who will be making decisions some visuals.
They've been spoken to.
Not spoken, an actual picture.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
We sent them photos from people's yards with the flames. I mean, I don't want to take away from what you're saying. I understand, and we've done that, and we've been very passionate about it. All I can tell you is the people that you voted in at the state level are not interested.
But maybe we should more visual. Maybe we should have a picket. I'll be willing to engage, do some graphics, big billboards, how this will, maybe trickle to the media.
We would love your help. Thank you for offering to help, because the more ways we can tell this story and this narrative, the better. But Alex is correct. We, the other neighbors, everyone has been tirelessly. So many of you came with me to Jesse Gabriel's office, and I was reviewing the footage from December 15th this morning, and I thought, in December, we were all so passionate and well-spoken, and we had these same points. So we've been at it now almost 7 months, so I want to give you all credit, and I think we should keep pressing forward, but I want to also make sure that everyone is understanding just how much each of these roads have been traveled. And so we have an election coming up. We have an opportunity to make our voices heard. Hopefully our representatives will follow in Bob's shoes and come here and meet with us in public together. But right now we just haven't been able to make that happen, and we've asked so many times.
And I did send photos and videos to Buffy Wicks and to Mike Fong, the two authors of this, prior to meeting with them, so that they would have that. So they have seen some very graphic photos and video.
Hi, my name is Angie. Thank you guys so much for being here. Jackie, for all the work that you've done. It sounds like you put a ton of work into this. And Alex and Bob, thank you guys so much for leading the charge. I'm hearing that you guys you have to be exhausted from this, so thank you. I have two questions for Bob. If we can think of like other species that we think are endangered in our neighborhood, should we email you with what the species, or should we email the group and rely on them to email your office so that you can kind of coordinate that attack front?
Yeah, it would actually, I mean, the key is getting the biologists and the conservancy. So if you have species like that, we have to get, I would send it to Paul Edelman at the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. I mean, send it to us as well. You can send it to me, you can send it to the team here. They'll get it to the right folks.
Forward it along. We actively talk to Paul from the Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy. We will forward on anything that anyone comes up with. We're always open to ideas. I can tell you that we've had the most credible biologists working on this, and the plan is the plan. And we take very seriously the fact that we represent this community, so we try not to negate anyone's ideas here, but we've been trying to explore every avenue possible. And we've been going through the letters from the city and saying, oh, here's one, this is one that hasn't been approved yet, let's try and explore that avenue. And the reason why we wanted to have this meeting is because we wanted to tell you we're running out of avenues.
I just wanted to really give them kudos for that, because they really are going through it, and they're working hand in glove with my team, so they're coming up with great stuff. Because none of us are experts in this. We're all sort of dealing with this as it's come to us, but they have been fantastic and working very closely with my team, and we're taking, as in throwing everything we can at the wall that could possibly help. And if someone has a new idea, we will throw that at the wall too.
Yes, please.
All right, Elizabeth Daniel over there, Alice, Jake in the back. Elizabeth, my fellow director, we're coming up with great ideas and really and following through on every idea that's out there.
And then, real quick, and thank you for your appreciation. I want to throw your appreciation to us right back at our families. I've had a chance to meet my new friends' families and my own sweet husband. They've watched us talk about this at breakfast and lunch and dinner, and they've let us, devote this time. So I appreciate that. But I wanted to re-emphasize that Bob's team, I find them repeating back to me the things that I hear us saying. So they're listening so carefully. They're listening to comprehend, and that type of listening is so important.
So Jackie, my question for you is, what's the percentage of community engagement we have, and how can we work together to increase that for you? And the reason I ask you this is because I just found out about this meeting like 4 days ago, and this is the first I'm hearing of it. And that was because I was running around the neighborhood in my daily run, and I happened to come across one of your flyers taped to somebody's fence.
Right.
So you know what I mean? That's kind of like an old school flyer way of finding out something really important is happening in my backyard.
Yeah, very rad. I'm so glad you found us this way. We are benefiting, we have a huge percentage of engagement, and the most important thing is while this is a group that nears the 1,000 mark, it's the percentage of people within that group who show up and send letters and also add their own voice. In the time of AI, the uniqueness of your voice is very important. If I can access those tools to test our comments for uniqueness, the city can. And the fact that you aren't a robot still matters. It does, I promise. I'm a roboticist by trade. And we want you, the best thing you can do to spread our message is tell your neighbors. After the fires, the horrific fires, as well as the pandemic, what I've noticed is every pod of neighbors has set up a group text. If you're not on the group text, please ask your neighbor next to you to add you. But in that group text, please communicate out what we're doing, because we'll keep flyering and we'll keep approaching you in Serenia Park and, trying not to waste your time. But you guys now are the ones who can help us do the most good by reaching out to the people around you and staying connected and carpooling when it comes time to go to city council and not everyone can take a day off. I've been very blessed to be able to take some time off and work on this. Again, my family has understood and let me use that time for this. But even in the wee hours, sending in the notices counts, adding their voices counts. It's all part of showing them that we all care.
Evening, I'm Johnny Walker, the president of Woodland Hills Homeowners Organization. On behalf of the homeowners, we really want to thank you as we begin to close down the meeting for this evening. The work that you have done has just been absolutely excellent. Could not have been better. It came at very strange times before Thanksgiving. You guys jumped into it and done a great job of it. Bob, you have as well. For all those that are neighbors that are around, anyone who has, that's by the golf course, that has ring cameras that are out there, go back and look at them. If you can find any photographs of any mountain lions that have walked onto that property, that is gold. And as you've heard, the only way they're going to defeat this particular application right now is going to be on the habitat issues. And that's going to be the mountain lions. Not anything else. Don't think about anything else that's going to go on. That's the focus right now. That's what we should be working towards. Now, mind you, go back on those cameras and look and find it. If you do, send it over to Allison, send it over to Bob's office, send it over to Paul for the Conservancy. That's going to be the way this is going to be won. But watch the following. This is going to be a long process, as Bob has told you. This is going to stretch out potentially for a long period of time, depending upon what the outcome is for the city. Be aware it's going to take money. You're going to have to deep into your pockets for that, but be aware of this. If this goes through, the amount that you're going to lose is going to be far more than what you're thinking about donating to be able to stop this. It's going to take time, it's going to take money, it's going to take effort. And personally, as a trial lawyer, I have got questions whether or not this law is constitutional to begin with. I think we're being denied a lot of our rights by this that was not known to the general public. But we'll leave that for another time. But for right now, thank you for the work you've done. Thank you all for your
Thank you very much. This is a 100% volunteer organized event, so on your way out, please take any trash with you. If you see a folding